quick thank you to our sponsors for making this podcast possible. They keep this show free to listen to.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
We are going to be talking about growing up with emotionally immature parents and the long-term effects of that. And so I know many of us grew up with parents who are emotionally immature. I don't know if any of you have read the book, but it's lovely. And we're going to just take a little branch of that today. Growing up with emotionally immature parents, we're going to talk about what it actually does and what it costs us. And more importantly, what do we do about it now that we have our own children? You probably already know this term or this title of this book. It's all over social media these days, and so many people in the mental health space discuss it. Parenting experts talk about it. A lot of you have done the inner child work, either on your own or with help. A lot of you can recite the 4 types of emotionally immature parents, which are emotional, driven, passive, rejecting. My parents, I think, were all 4 of those, to be honest. And that's exactly why I'm not going to spend this training defining that diagnosis. Many of us already know this, and you already have that. What I'm going to do is something different. I'm going to talk about what it actually looks like to do the work daily in your home, in the middle of a meltdown, and not passing it on to our kids, because that is the part nobody's really teaching us or talking about it. There's a lot of naming and a lot of defining and a lot of saying, yes, this happened, but there's not a lot of application. How do I take the next step? So before I tell you my story, I want to ground us in something. The parents who raised most of us in this meeting were operating inside a paradigm. They were not just making this stuff up. They were following a model that had been handed down for generations and generations. Things like spare the rod, spoil the child. Children should be seen and not heard. Because I said so. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Most of us have heard one of those phrases, and some of us have heard all of those phrases. And if not just from our parents, just from society. So that generation believed feelings made children weak, that comfort spoiled them, that respect was something kids owed adults, not something that adults owed kids. They believed that mistakes had to be punished or they would multiply. They believed love was implied just because they had a roof over their head and food on the table. And they did not need to say it out loud. And this was not just a few parents. This was actually default. This was every grandparent's living room, every teacher's classroom, every coach's locker room. And inside that paradigm, an emotionally immature parent often did not look like the problem. They looked normal. They looked like that's what they were supposed to be doing. A father who couldn't tolerate his child's tears looked like a father who just didn't put up with weakness. A mother who needed her child to manage her moods looked like a mother who deserved respect. A parent who couldn't name an emotion to save their life just looked like a parent who didn't waste time on feelings. They had things to do. So nothing looked out of place. My own parents were in this paradigm. They were boomers. I grew up in a home where mistakes were not tolerated, where being upset was not okay, unless it was the parents, where the unspoken rule was, you don't bring anything hard to this family. My parents didn't invent that. It wasn't something they were unique to. They were raised that same way. Their parents were raised that same way. They were emotionally abandoned themselves. And they were just doing what they knew. They didn't know any better. So this is not a story about bad people or bad parents. This is a story about a real paradigm that exists in society. And the only way the paradigm changes is if someone, somewhere in the chain, decides to do the work. And I'm going to talk about that today because I think that's what's important. What was the unspoken rule in your house growing up? Mine was never make a mistake. It's not tolerated, but only mistakes by adults are tolerated. Mistakes were not tolerated. Only mistakes by adults were tolerated. What was yours? So here is what happened to me. About 2 years into my own healing journey, my oldest daughter, Esme, was correcting her little sister, Pia. Pia must have been about 5, and Esme used a phrase, a tone, a hand on the hip kind of stance. And my whole body went cold because I was not watching Esme. I was watching myself. I was watching the exact words I had used 100 times. I was watching what I had taught her. The cycle of behavior that my 8-year-old had adopted started and ended with me. And the worst part was, what I had used on Esme was not original to me either. I had a mother who corrected and shamed. She had a mother who corrected and shamed. And now there was 3 of us. And I was watching a 4th. 4 generations of moms correcting and shaming each other. That hit me so hard. And then I made a decision that this was where it stopped. Okay. So these kids are just holding up a mirror to you. They're not trying to hurt you. They're not trying to do something that's unkind. They're just doing what they've seen done to them. And I went to therapy for years, and I spent years in the classroom before I had children. Years, like a lot of years. And I had read everything, and I could name the patterns, and I could explain development to somebody, and I could explain attachment therapy. And when my own children pushed every button, I forgot what I had learned. None of it helped me. And that's not because therapy doesn't work. Therapy is essential. It's because knowing and doing are 2 completely different skills. And nothing in the world brings out the unhealed parts of you like having your own child have a meltdown in front of you on an afternoon at 5:45 when you haven't even had something to eat. The intellectual work and the somatic work live in 2 different parts of you. And connecting them is the next piece. So here's the reframe I want you to take home with you today. The goal is not to figure out what was wrong with your parents. We already know. You have probably already figured out what's wrong with your parents. The goal is not to keep proving to yourself that you're different from them, because you are. The goal is to organize your life to help yourself make the next step, to give your child something you did not get. And the only way to do that is to reparent the version of you who didn't get it. Working on unraveling all of those unspoken rules from the past and the way your parents raised you. That's the work. That's the whole game. And even though it takes time, it's what makes the biggest difference. The transformation you get when you unlearn these patterns is so liberating for you and your kids. Now, when you think about your own parents emotionally, not your relationship with them, just emotionally, who they were for you as a child, what do you feel first? A, resentment, B, compassion, C, confusion, D, sadness, or E, something else, or maybe all of these. There's no wrong answer in that. There's what I want you to know, that it's okay to feel all of these things. And some of us are oscillating between all of them, and I think it's normal. But here's what all 4 of these feelings have in common. None of them by themselves change what happens when your child melts down on a Tuesday at 5:45. That is the gap we're going to close. Let me give you some research because I think it's also important. The CDC study on adverse childhood experiences, one of the largest public health studies ever done in the United States, found that about 2/3 of adults reported at least one adverse childhood experience, and 87% of people who had one had at least another one. So growing up in a home with emotionally immature parents is not a niche experience. It's all of us. There's also a body of research called the intergenerational transmission of parenting. Big words, but a very simple idea. It looks at whether the way our parents raised us shows up in the way we raise our children. And the answer, of course, we all know, is yes. Patterns transmit, they repeat. They transmit in mothers, they transmit in fathers, they transmit whether or not you read every parenting book, they transmit. And here's the part that we don't really talk about. Across all that research, the single biggest moderator, the thing that interrupts the cycle most reliably, is not how much you know about your parents. It's what you do with what you feel when you are activated. Patterns are interrupted in the moment, not in retrospect. That is the work. Dr. Laura Markham, if you don't know her, she's lovely and she's been on my podcast if you want to look her up. She puts it perfectly. She says, fear is what causes control issues. And when we are hurt and scared or sad, it's hard to have a positive attitude. So the parents who break the cycle are not the parents who have figured it all out. They're the parents who have learned to recognize their own fear in real time and not hand it to their child. And making that recognition is the work we do inside of Peace and Parenting. So here are 3 practices that we use that I want you to take a look at. These are not theoretical. These are things to actually do in this order. When I catch the old pattern rising up in me, this is what I do. They are the same 3 things that I teach my clients. None of them require special equipment or therapist or speed dial or perfect weekend. You can do them this week. So let's do these things. The next time your child does something that makes your chest tight, notice that. When the heat rises and the words are forming and you can feel the old version of you about to come out of your mouth, I want you to do one thing before you do anything else. Pause. But you have to notice the tightness or the clammy hands or the sweaty brow. You have to notice what's happening inside of you. And when you notice that thing, that's your alarm bell to pause and take a breath. And you have to ask yourself this question: what am I actually feeling right now? Why? That's it. That's all you need to make a difference. I have 4 questions I ask myself in those moments. What am I feeling right now? Why am I letting this push me? Why am I reacting? Why do I need to be angry with my child? And what do they actually have to do with this upset? Almost every single time when I ask those questions, the answer is not even about my kid. When I really get down to it, the answer is about me. The answer is some version of I feel unheard. I feel disrespected. I feel like I was failing. I'm fearful. My child did not put those things there. My child just touched them. The pause does not solve the trigger. The pause separates you from the trigger long enough to choose something else. That's the thing to do. This is the second practice, and it is one of the ones that parents often skip. You're going to mess up this week. I'm going to mess up this week. I mess up all the time. And there is no version of this work where you do not occasionally or often slip into the pattern you came from. The brain has decades of practice and decades of programming. It will happen. The thing that breaks the cycle is not perfection. The thing that breaks the cycle is repair. And here's what it looks like. After you yell or snap, after you say the thing your mother used to say, go back and find your child. Get down on their level and say something like, I lost my temper. It was not your fault. That was not about you. I was feeling so overwhelmed and I did not handle it the way I wanted to. I love you and I'm learning. That's it. Full responsibility. Mea culpa. This is my fault, not yours. And that's the whole thing. Repair matters. Most of us grew up in homes where adults did not repair. They got upset, they exploded like my dad, and then everyone walked around like nothing happened. Or they walked around in silence and they shunned us because we needed to be ignored because it was our fault. So we learned that ruptures don't get fixed, they get buried. We never saw an adult say sorry to a child. We never heard someone else take responsibility for hard situations. And we often took the blame ourselves. When you repair with your child, you're doing 2 things at once. You're healing the moment and you're teaching your child that ruptures can be repaired. You're giving them a model for apology. You're giving them a model you didn't have. That is reparenting yourself and your child simultaneously. So the third practice is the one I want to spend a little more time on because this is where the deeper work happens. I want you to hear this phrase from me carefully. Childhood hurts. Childhood hurts are the wounds we carry, often unnamed, from how we were raised. They are the moments when we were not listened to, the moments when our feelings were dismissed, the moments when we were told in words or in silence that we were too much or not enough or wrong for feeling what we felt. They are not always big traumatic events. Sometimes they are the 1,000 small moments where nobody saw us. These hurts don't go away with time. They get buried and then they resurface decades later, the first time our own child hits that same nerve. The moment in the kitchen where your daughter looks at you with the exact face you used with your mother and doesn't listen to you, and now you don't feel heard. The only way I have found to actually unravel the childhood hurt is to slow down enough to feel it. And the tool that has worked for me for decades now is journaling. And let me show you how it works. Okay, this is part of the training I most wish someone had given me when I was just starting out. So I'm going to give it to you. All of this you can find in my journaling guide. When you journal, you are doing two things at once. You are slowing your nervous system down and you're letting the buried feelings find a path to the surface. Most of us have lived a long time at thinking speed. Journaling forces you to land. You slow down, the brain slows down, and the slower pace gives you time to feel. I have clients who haven't cried about certain things for many, many years, and they write them down and they cry and cry and cry and get to the feelings below what has happened to them. Journaling and writing can be magic because writing is slow, and slow is what buried feelings need. Okay, here's the rule of practice. When you journal about your childhood, and people make this mistake all the time, do not write about what happened. I mean, it's okay to write what happened, but what you really want to write is what you felt. The story is not where the healing is, the feeling is. So you can say, this incident, I came home late, and then talk all about how you felt. If you remember being 8 years old and being yelled at for spilling something, don't describe the spill. Describe what was happening in your body when the yelling started. Describe what you felt and what you wished an adult had said to you. Because what you end up saying to yourself is what you end up feeling. That is where the unraveling lives. So here's how to actually do it. So you pick a time. I like the morning, maybe you like the evening. Find a place where it's quiet, a place that's yours. Pick a chair or a corner of the couch or outside. Pick one prompt, not a bunch, just one thing you're going to work on. Maybe sometimes I like to think about an incident, like that incident yesterday with Esme where I yelled at her. What was going on for me? Can I find something similar in my own childhood I can write about? Does it spark something from my own world? So here are some sample prompts. What did tantruming look like is always a good one. Who actually listened to you? And if nobody, how does it make you feel when you sit with that? And what would it have felt like to be heard as a child? These prompts will crack something open if you let them. Pace yourself. One prompt is enough for one session. Another good idea is my book. You can find it at unpunishedbook.com. And in each chapter, I have journaling prompts at the end of each chapter, and they're really, really good. So what if nothing comes up? A lot of people say nothing comes up because often our response to trauma is to bury it, and our body doesn't want us to bring it out. So you're going to have to really, really push yourself to get there. And that's okay. Just give yourself the time. Start with one image or one sensation or one word or one really hard memory that you have, and start to really journal about those feelings. And what we find is that other feelings start coming up, other incidences start coming up. And if you can do that today, just write one sentence. I don't remember much. Write that, sit with that, think about that. Why was that? There have to be memories in there. Tomorrow, try it again. And memories come back in trickles sometimes, or sometimes they come back in floods. It just takes time to be with yourself for them to show up. Some of you are going to write for 10 minutes and find a feeling that scares you. So stop, close the book. This is work, but it's not therapy. If something really big surfaces, you want a therapist or a coach holding it with you. We are unraveling here. We're not going to rip through it. There's a big difference. Thank you for joining me on the Peace in Parenting podcast. I'll see you next time. Hey there, Peace in Parenting family. If you love the podcast but wish to enjoy it without interruptions, your wish has come true. Introducing the ad-free version of the Peace in Parenting podcast, available exclusively on Apple Podcast. As a subscriber, you'll get all the heartfelt advice, parenting stories, and actionable tips you love without any ads. For less than the cost of a coffee each month, you will enjoy uninterrupted listening while also supporting our work to help you build stronger connections with your kids. Try it out for free. Simply find Peace in Parenting on Apple Podcasts, click Try Free, and you'll gain immediate access to our ad-free episodes. There's no commitment and you can cancel anytime. So if you're ready for a more peaceful, uninterrupted listening experience, subscribe now.
Let's keep focusing on connection without the distractions.